Today on Upfront, banning the bump stock, moves in Washington and Madison prohibit the part that enabled the Las Vegas shooter to kill so many. Next, what, if anything, can be done to respond to an epidemic of mass shootings? I'll ask Democratic U.S. Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey today on Upfront. Then Foxconn will build in Racine County. County Executive Jonathan Delagrave on what local officials are offering the company. Plus, how healthcare providers are handling the uncertainty over Obamacare's future.
Covering the issues important to Wisconsin. This is Upfront with Mike Goucher.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Upfront. 1 week after the deadliest mass shooting in modern history, one bipartisan point of agreement seems to be emerging. It concerns the bump stock, the accessory the Las Vegas killer used that made his semi-automatic weapon mimic an automatic, making his attack even more deadly. Few people had heard of this part before last Sunday. Now Democrats and some Republicans say bump stocks might need to be banned or regulated.
We all know and believe that fully auto weapons are illegal. And so is this a big gap that needs to be closed? And if so, how to close it?
There's also a new bill in Wisconsin's legislature to ban bump stocks. With nearly 60 people dead in Las Vegas, is banning the bump stock a starting point or the only thing Congress can agree on in response to yet another mass shooting? We're asking Democratic U.S. Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, who's in Wisconsin for an event with U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin. Senator, welcome back to the program.
It's really good to be back here. Thank you very much. I love your town.
Yeah, but it's good to have you here. Let's talk a little bit about what happened in Las Vegas and the response to it. What should the response be? You said we're not powerless to address this. What should the response be?
Well, for me, we should be constantly looking as a society of what can we do in a bipartisan way to protect families. And there's common sense things that, frankly, over 70% of gun owners believe in, 70% of NRA members even believe in, things like common sense background checks. And we know we have enough data across states that implement comprehensive background checks, you see deaths due to gunfire go down. In fact, you're just using domestic violence for an example. You have 40% less women who are murdered by their partner in states that have these common sense background checks. So I've been kind of, since I've become a mayor and looked at the fact that I was a mayor of Newark, and I saw that, wait a minute, law-abiding citizens with guns are not the ones that are causing the shootings in my streets. I've got to keep the guns out of people that shouldn't have them. And so I've been sort of dismayed so far within the Trump administration that made it easier for severely mentally ill people to get guns. I think we should be going the other way, is trying to figure out ways that people that are high risk should not get guns. So whether it's criminals or people who are domestic abusers or frankly people who are terrorists, because we have this gaping loophole in this country where you can be on the terrorist no-fly list and you can still so easily buy a gun without consequences.
So that's what you'd like to see. What do you think you will see in Congress?
Well, please understand that we have a nation of where Congress is the last to move. In other words, the old saying in Washington is change doesn't come from Washington, it comes to Washington by citizens demanding it. And so whether it's civil rights legislation, that you didn't have people like Strom Thurmond saying, you know what, I think I'll agree with this. It really was incredible pressure put on Washington. So the things I'd like to see, please, we shouldn't surrender that ground. We're not powerless. We shouldn't just say Congress is not going to do anything and throw up our hands. It's time to roll up our sleeves and be convicted that we've got to get Congress to move. But the bump stock thing now, the ways to alter these guns, right. I was happy to hear NRA as well as other congressional leaders say, you know what, someone sitting up in a perch, the damage that they can do, the carnage that they can create, as we saw in Las Vegas, maybe that's something that we can do. And so that's a beginning. It's a place that I hope we can seize that territory and hopefully prevent something like this from happening in the future.
Do you think that is likely? Yeah, I even noticed the language is different. Democrats are talking about banning the bump stock, but Republicans are talking about more tightly regulating it.
Right.
Can you find common ground even on that?
Look, I'm a guy that's passed legislation with everybody from Ted Cruz to even partnering with many of my Republican colleagues. That's what we're there for. Americans are sick and tired of screaming and yelling. Where's the common ground? Let's at least get the things we agree on done. And this is something that sounds like there's areas of agreement. We need to get to work and find a way to move forward.
Let me jump in and talk about the screaming and yelling you just referred to, because America has some big things to do on its plate. We still haven't completely resolved the health care situation. That's still an issue. Tax reform is an issue.
We have a lot to do. But yet, given the hyper partisan world we live in, are we capable, is Congress capable of doing big things right now?
Well, look, Congress is doing things that don't make the headlines all the time. I've seen in the last couple of months us do some very positive things on areas that are important. But you're right, there are things that need to be done, from healthcare improvements, because Obamacare, I don't want to go back to the days that people were denied health and coverage for pre-existing condition, or that the number one reason people were declaring bankruptcy in America was because they couldn't afford their medical bills. We made things a lot better, but we have a lot more work to do, because there are still Americans right now that can't afford their prescription drugs. There's still Americans right now that are paying too much of their income towards health coverage. So I want to get back to work on not getting rid of Obamacare and all the gains that we made under it, but fixing the problems with it so we can be a country, as great as we are, we need to be a nation that has affordable health care, access for everybody, and that's really good quality. And that's the goal that I think every American shares, despite your background. We need to get to the pragmatic work getting it done. And my criticism, I think a lot of us were really hoping that Donald Trump would come in and, despite the way he campaigned, become a guy that says, you know what, I'm going to make deals. I'm going to find, I may not be able to get the whole 100 off the table, but I'm going to find a way to move the bar forward. But that's not the way they did health care. There were no Democrats invited to the table. They didn't hold any hearings. They didn't even invite in the larger community. They took a very bipartisan, a very partisan way of doing it. I'm worried that that's going to happen now again with tax reform.
I want to ask you one final question about the partisan divide that we talked about at the beginning of this, and that is, how do we bridge that? What is the role of people like you in bridging this gap, which seems, according to Pew, to be larger than ever, the way we look at each other? How do we change that?
Well, I hope that what I'm trying to do is what we all try to do. First of all, we've got to stop vilifying each other and demonizing each other. I was listening to somebody who was on a podcast where they were criticizing the president for calling everybody names. I mean, the kind of names and nicknames, but they were calling him a name in the present. They were using vulgarity to refer to Donald Trump. And you can't change something by becoming the very thing you're trying to change. We've got to start extending each other more grace. We've got to start approaching each other with a more courageous empathy, so that we understand that there's no left or right way to go forward in America. We've got to find our common ground and begin to start acting again with common purpose.
Senator Cory Booker is the Democrat from New Jersey. It's good to have you back on the program.
Thank you very much for
being with us. And my conversation with Senator Booker will continue now on our website, where we're talking more about legislation that he's sponsoring with Wisconsin Senator Tammy Baldwin to fight poverty. You'll find that on the Upfront section of WISN.com. Foxconn will build in Mount Pleasant and Racine County. Coming up next on Upfront, the incentive package local officials are offering the company and why they say taxpayers are protected.
Upfront with Mike Goucher, brought to you by the American Transmission Company and the Wisconsin Corn Growers Association.